Welcome to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm JD Davidson. There's been a long debate throughout the Wisconsin higher education community and with lawmakers over race recently. Earlier this week, a policy group sent a letter to the University of Wisconsin saying the school continues to prioritize race in some decision making. Joining me today is the Center Square's Wisconsin contributor, Ben Yount. Ben, what is the Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty concerned about at UW?
Well, there was a decision from the United States Supreme Court about Harvard and its use of race in determining admissions as well as just about everything else on campus. And the United States Supreme Court was clear that you cannot discriminate based on people's race, even if you think you're discriminating for a good reason, even if you're saying, well, we're trying to give opportunities to people who have historically been discriminated against. And, in quite simple terms, racism is bad, even if it's against people who you think you're helping. And this is what Will's concern is that the university has made some strides in changing its policies, dealing with race, particularly admissions. Again, colorblind admissions are a big thing. But this specifically dealt with the 2024 Diversity Awards and a number of fellowships. And they were all focused on students of color, students of certain races, first-generation college students. And it left out an awful lot of people who just didn't fit those racial criteria. And one of the fellowships, the BIPOC fellowship, is at the center of a federal civil rights complaint that is being, in the court of law challenged as being discriminatory and unconstitutional. And Will said, look, we can appreciate what it is that you think you're trying to do here, but once again, you cannot discriminate against some people because of the color of their skin. And this is going to be an interesting conversation, not just for the University of Wisconsin, in particular the University of Wisconsin-Madison, but this is something that an awful lot of universities are going to have to figure out how they walk this line, because everything from, affirmative action admissions to grad school, to housing, to certain scholarships, there's an awful lot of racial ramification at an awful lot of universities. And the university has continued to say it supports diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's going to be really tough to find the middle ground between supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion, but yet doing so in a way that doesn't discriminate against anyone's race or any other protected status.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, not just for the University of Wisconsin, in schools across Wisconsin, but across the country, trying to untangle all of these things and then doing it with donor money. So fellowships or endowments are created with specific purposes, trying to work with donors and to unweave these types of things could, one, take a long time, and two, be incredibly challenging and financially stressful for universities around the country.
Just think of the Diversity Awards, which was one of the things cited in this Will complaint, is that, okay, the Diversity Awards are supposed to be about people from diverse backgrounds. It specifically talks about, underrepresented groups, Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanic Americans. Well, you literally almost cannot have a diversity award if it's open to everyone. It then becomes the Everyone Awards. Untangle, I think, is the best word for this, because some of these things will have to go away if you're only looking at this. It's one thing to say, I'm going to give you the Ben Yount Fellowship for aspiring broadcasters. And David Letterman famously had a scholarship at his alma mater, Ball State, for C students. He's like, look, kids who come to class sometimes deserve opportunities too. I always loved that. But to set the specifics of how you get this opportunity or that grant or this fellowship without leaving somebody out, it's going to be a very difficult task. It is going to, again, the supporters say this is going to go back to merit. It's going to force universities to judge people not on some sort of arbitrary color of their skin, who their parents were, but on actual talent and need and merit and promise. But this is something that universities have made center to their mission. And yeah, it's going to be years of trying to figure out just how to parse through with each program, each class, each fellowship, each apprenticeship, each internship opportunity. But, look, the University of Wisconsin has plenty of people on staff and plenty of lawyers. I'm sure they'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, they're smart folks. The other interesting part of this is, where do you draw the line? Clearly, the Supreme Court has said race cannot be an issue. But when you start talking about need or talent, I feel there's going to be someone that claims I'm discriminated against if I don't get a basketball scholarship because I'm not as tall as this person, or I don't get a football scholarship because I can't throw it as far as this person.
I tell the joke that I started paying much more attention in high school to my classes when I realized that Notre Dame had plenty of slow white kids on the field and they were in band, that they didn't need another one to try and play offensive tackle for them. This is going to have, again, an awful lot of ramifications. The idea of separate races at graduation, separate races for freshman orientation, certain dorms or floors, reserved for just these people or that people. This was the stuff that was very popular on college campuses just about a year or two ago. That was the conversation almost before COVID. How do we have safe spaces on college campuses? And that goes all the way from Harvard and Yale down to the University of Wisconsin's smaller campuses. That stuff's all going to get thrown out the window. I wouldn't worry so much about college sports, because now that, it wasn't Northwestern, but whoever won their unionization, who said they're going to be treated as employees, that's going to kill college sports. They're outside of football and maybe about 100 basketball programs, there will not be any college sports if universities are forced to treat these people as employees. It just simply won't happen. And so you're not going to have to worry about that concern in the coming years. Other concerns, yeah, but that concern, no.
That is another podcast for us, and we could spend way more than 8 minutes talking on that. Ben, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.
Knowledge is power, and you deserve to know what happens in your state government. That's why the Center Square's reporting zeroes in on state authorities publishing stories that show where your money goes and who spends it. The Center Square gives power to the taxpayer by tracking politicians' use of the people's money and demanding transparency from state-run agencies. This is how the Center Square equips you, the American taxpayer, to hold your state government accountable. Sign up now for your state's Center Square newsletter at thecentersquare.com.